Hello, and welcome to the Cultivating Confidence podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nicole Grams. I am a life coach who specializes in anxiety, health, and human design. And I also happen to be a functional medicine pharmacist. This podcast is a compilation of conversations that I've had with clients and colleagues. So listen in as we explore the mind, body, and soul's confidence in its many forms. Today's recording was inspired by multiple things. Part what I'm going through in my life again, as usual, rather. And I came across a quote that I shared on social media, but it goes something along the lines of, there are two forms of courage in this world. One demands that we jump into action with our armor on, and the other demands that we strip ourselves bare naked and surrender. Bravery is a curious thing. And today we are talking more about the strip ourselves naked version, which I also call vulnerability. And I'm not going to lie, I'll start with a secret, right? I was terrified while I was writing the outline for this. I was with a friend of mine at a coffee shop. We were diligently working on our stuff. And there were multiple times where I almost scrapped the whole thing because because I just wanted to throw it out and choose a topic that was more palatable, which is funny because I was feeling vulnerable about some of the things that I decided to include. But I wanted to get rid of it. I wanted to avoid it so I didn't have to feel vulnerable as I'm talking about vulnerability. I wanted something that didn't scare the shit out of me in the process, right? But I got scared because, like I mentioned, it's something that I'm working through in my own life, in being seen and being vulnerable in front of people. When I think about being seen and being truly myself in front of other people, it's one of the most terrifying things that I can think of to do. And many people would agree with me on that, because and this is like speaking very generally, what if I do something or say something that I think is completely myself, but you think I'm weird, or you think I'm scary or disgusting, or you think I'm too much to handle or too loud or too quiet, or you feel uncomfortable in some sort of way? Like, what then? Like, what then? But then also, like, what if in this process, you reject me, you leave me, you expose me, you threaten me, you hurt me, right? And really any of those things, historically speaking, are possible. And what the instinct that kicks in to tell you all of these things to worry about is your survival instinct. And this concept in some circles is called the witch wound. And it's called the witch wound because you will get persecuted and tortured by others, or there's the threat of persecution and torture by others if you let them see the real you. They will call you a witch and burn you at the stake, even if you're just a midwife that is easing the pain of a mother in labor with herbs, right? The fear and the shame and the grief that follows us to this day is real. It is embedded in our soul and in our DNA to avoid things that will get us kicked out of the group, right? Kicked out of our safety, kicked out of our comfort. And it's also a huge part of societal standards and culture, in the, like, you will be rejected if you don't adhere to these specific rules and look this specific way and wear these specific styles and love people with these specific genitals, right? So as imperfect humans, we go about our lives doing our best to fit into these standards, and we might find other people in sort of splinter groups that differ from societal standards in very specific ways, and we cling to them like our life depends on it, because these other weird people make you feel alive. And even then, like, depending on the situation, you can't show them the rest of you that doesn't fit in their version of acceptable. So you end up with little pockets of people who know different pieces of you, or at least this is what I have found in my life. I've got the people that I can dance and be crazy with. I've got the people that I can do athletic things with. I've got the people that I can be super vulnerable with. But like, there's very little overlap in my life, and I have different, and it's awesome that I have people that can fulfill all these different needs in my life. But also, like, think about what you're hiding from some of your best friends or even your significant other. And some of the, like, and I'm just talking like your closest friends, right? Like, I'm not saying that you need to show all of the parts of you to every single person you ever come across, right? I'm just talking about the people that you really want to be connected with. Maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a spouse, right? Or a significant other. But these are the people that you want to be the most yourself with, right? And if it's your person, they are supposed to love you no matter what, and you're supposed to love them no matter what, right? But what if you build your relationship with them by only showing the parts of you that fit into their worldview so that you would have somebody to love you? So like they see this, they like this, they'll keep you, right? Maybe you occasionally push the boundaries a bit so you can feel a little bit more like yourself and freak them out in small ways and let them get used to it as the new normal. The concept I like to or I like to call the controlled burn. It's the, all right, we're going to do this right now. It's going to be a little bit scary and a little bit vulnerable, but like not enough to make a real big difference. And we're just going to, push the boundary just a little bit. And for the most part, I think this is what a lot of us do. And we find contentment in this new box that we have made that isn't quite the shape that we want to be in, but it's close enough. And I can say for certain that it's what I have done. And it's kind of like, okay, I will show you this part of me because I think you'll like that. And I'm going to hide this other part of me and I'm going to keep it away from you as much as I possibly can because I fear that you won't like it as much and you'll reject me or harm me or expose me to others who will reject me or hate me or, all of these things. And through this process, like I said, we can create a good life. There's nothing wrong with it. And it kind of feels like everything is okay until it's not. And for me, it was sort of a slow expansion of the part of me that wanted to be let out of this cage to see the light of day. It became no longer acceptable for me to be palatable, even if this palatability was completely made up in my head, which it 100% was in my case. At one point, I decided that if I had one regret at the end of my life, it was not going to be that I never learned how to be completely myself in front of other people. I wanted to be done hiding. I wanted to let the dark feminine energy that I revel in out to play. I wanted to let my hopes and fears and dreams and desires hang out, no matter how dark or weird or crazy they seemed. And I wanted to let my partner see it as well, so I could connect more deeply with him. And as we go through this phase in our relationship, I realized that in addition to the parts of me that I consciously hid, I unintentionally hid parts of me as well. In that I hid parts of me that I didn't even think needed hiding once I said them out loud. And it was humbling for me to find this out because I had no idea that I had done that, right? It was subconscious, it was not intentional. But I hid the part of me that really freaked out the time I went down to part-time employment and my income dropped. Like I had a whole ass identity crisis and a meltdown at that time. And I had an amazing therapist and a coach to help me through it. So I never had to breathe a word to him. I didn't have to. I handled it myself. I didn't need to drag him into it. It was taken care of. It was my issue. I didn't need to burden him with it, right? I also hid the part of me that believed that if I continued on this journey of self growth, I would change so much that I'd leave him in the dust and we'd have nothing to hold us together anymore. And I again relied on my team, my coach and therapist, to help point out that this most likely was not going to happen. But I couldn't let him hear this fear of mine, right? So I just, let it roam around in my subconscious and got desperate and clingy and needed constant reassurance anytime I got stressed. I need so many hugs, right? I also hid the part of me that was scared that becoming a confident and successful entrepreneur would mean that we would grow apart because everyone knows that it's either the amazing career or the relationship, and you can't possibly have both, right? And again, I relied on my team to point out my thought errors. And once again, I unconsciously omitted the truth from my partner and instead self sabotaged in many different ways. And you might be able to see how me hiding these parts of me, whether it was intentional or not, might cause some problems. And hiding from the rest of the world, I, for a long time, hid that I was super into all of the woo things like crystals and tarot and human design. And I love feminine empowerment workshops and dancing in the moonlight and, just letting my freak flag fly, whatever that means in the moment, right? It doesn't matter what's going on. I just want to be a part of it. But I couldn't show the people of the internet that, right? Because they would cancel me as a medical professional if I liked these other things as well, right? It immediately, you know, ruined my credibility. And anything professional that I would say would be laughed at if I told anybody about this other part of me, right? So I indulged in private with my closest friends, and I didn't risk finding people that were like me out there in the ether. And as I wrote these examples, and these were just the first few ones that I could come up with as I was writing, they sound terrible to me. And they don't, as I look at them objectively, they're not reasons that I want to hide, right? And I realized that they kind of sounded more like suffering in silence, so as to not disturb the opinions of others about me. And I kind of was rereading them and I said, I bet I can translate this into a very simple example. And what I came up with was I'm only going to show you the parts of me that I think you'll like so that I can control your thoughts about me. And it was the inner control freak that was coming through in all of these, because what we want to do when we hide parts of ourselves is control what other people are thinking about you, or at least that's what I had going on. It's freaking terrible. um, I mean, just think about it. Like, if you found out your best friend or your partner was hiding their authentic self away from you so that they could control your thoughts about them, you would, like, if you find this out, you'd probably be like, what the fuck? Right. So, why do we do this to the people that we care about or to strangers on the internet? And it goes back to survival and self preservation. Brain wants to keep you safe, first and foremost. So, that makes this default mode hide, right? It's easy, it's simple, it's not as scary to hide as it is to be truly yourself. It is especially hard to be vulnerable in relationships that you've built that you have not intentionally created opportunities for vulnerability along the way, especially if you really like the connection that you do have. And especially when letting your partner in on that information, on whatever information it is, might threaten the foundation of the relationship, or like it feels like it does. It's one of the most terrifying things you can do because abandonment comes up. I'm going to be alone forever. And it's also the biggest opportunity you will ever have to be able to connect and grow with another human being. And deep connection and growth together is what I want. I like to think other people want that too. And if feeling so connected to another person and being completely yourself in front of them, like if that's possible, I want it, right? With as many people as possible, or at least a few, right? Like a few people that I trust and know and who know me, and I can be myself around them. And the only way to get those connections is through vulnerability. And with vulnerability comes risk. There will always be the risk that it doesn't work out as well as it could. The friend that you've had for 3 decades may never talk to you again, right? That's a possibility. The spouse that you've shared your life with may leave and never look back. That's one of the possible outcomes, right? But sometimes like you kind of have to take a look at it and allow yourself to make decisions that put things at risk. You have to be willing to risk it in order to find your people. And if you look at it, somebody said it a different way to me once, that like if being yourself puts the relationship at risk, is that really a person that you want a relationship with? Right? Do you want that connection with someone who refuses to accept those parts of you, or who won't talk to you about it, or who won't allow you to experience those parts of you, right? it puts the whole relationship at risk. And like, I personally don't want to be with someone that's like that. And I'm not saying that I am. Have no fear, but um there is a risk inherent in this whole process, right? And it took me a while to be willing to see that the risk is worth it and that I can stand on my own 2 feet in the process. It took me even longer to allow myself to start sharing these secret hidden pieces of me, and I'm still working on it today. But at some point along the way, I realized all of this hiding started with self-judgment. It wasn't anyone else judging me for what I was doing or thinking or saying. It was me prejudging myself so that others didn't get the chance. And you might notice this in your own life too. Anytime you find yourself saying things like, oh, but they might think this about me, or like, I want to do that, but what will people think? Like, probably that I've gone off the deep end, or, whatever other probably more terrible thing than that. But just notice that in both of those tiny examples, neither involved other people. It was just you in your own brain judging yourself, thinking, oh, they're going to think that. And it's sort of like if you start to deflect like this blame, almost these thought horrors onto other people, just notice that it's you that's coming up with them. And is there a way that you're judging yourself for whatever it is? And it may help to remember that, generally speaking, people want you to succeed, especially if they know you, especially if they love you. They want to be able to show support. And they're all more worried about themselves and what you're thinking about them than spending their time thinking badly about you, right? I'm not saying there won't be haters out there, but it's a lot smaller number than it seems. And keep in mind that this is not about oversharing either. Like, vulnerability is the balance between sharing things to connect and telling the true vulnerability is like with intention to connect, and telling the world your every private thought leans into the oversharing side of things, right? Like, you don't need to tell everybody everything. You can certainly keep whatever you want private to yourself. But vulnerability, when it's done with the purpose to connect and grow, I think is worth the cost of the discomfort. And that the cost is going to be different depending on what situation it is. Because obviously, you like, in order to build better work relationships, there has to be a level of vulnerability there. But that doesn't have to include all of your hopes, dreams, and desires if it's just, talking about the topic of a meeting and you have a problem with something that's going on at work, right? That's a different level of risk than it would be to share something with a partner if you think that they're going to react poorly, right? Or at least I think they're different levels. And as I was thinking about all this, when I take a look at people in real life or on the internet, I feel like I'm most drawn to the people who show at least some of their vulnerabilities to the world, especially if, they are currently making a living off of something like coaching, for example, like as an anxiety coach. I wouldn't want another anxiety coach that has not had anxiety, or at least has never shown that they used to think this way, right? I want to hear the stories about what they've been through and what their brain was doing and all the spirals that they get caught in, and like how they've worked through that. I, it makes, when I see people doing this from an authentic place, it makes me want to connect with them, and it makes me trust them, and it makes me want to work with them. And now I want to be like them personally, right? And I'm still learning to be comfortable with feeling wildly uncomfortable when I can't control how people will respond, which is literally never, by the way. You can never control how people will respond. You can only change what you think will change their mind. Like, it becomes this whole mind game, and it's just exhausting. So skip it, right? But the magic here is not in avoiding the judgment and criticism altogether, but not being afraid of the judgment and criticism. And notice that there's a difference there. The judgment and criticism may still happen. And if you're doing anything on the internet and being vulnerable on the internet, there will be people that will come after you for whatever reason. And I like to think it's just because they have nothing better to do with their lives. And all right, they want to get a rise out of me. It's probably not going to work, right? Doesn't matter. But the judgment and criticism may still happen. You just have to not be afraid of it. And it's an exercise in having your own back. It's an exercise in allowing people to be wrong about you, which is terrifying, right? Because we get super defensive sometimes and it's like, "Oh no, that's not what that is about. Like I didn't mean that. I don't do that," or whatever it is. Like what if instead of spending all your energy trying to tame the haters, you just find the people that connected with what you said and talk to them more, right? No matter and I I guess final words for tonight. I have a couple of I don't know if mantras are the right words, but um a couple of thoughts that I think are powerful thoughts that have helped me. And it's sort of I don't know, I get it's just helpful. But no matter how they respond, I will love myself and take care of myself. No matter how they respond, I will speak in a way that feels authentic to me. No matter how they respond, they're allowed to have their own thoughts and feelings without me trying to control them, right? Because the last thing I want is somebody trying to control my thoughts because I have my opinions and it's not possible for you to control what I'm thinking about things, right? You might say something that changes my mind, but you're not going to control what I'm thinking, right? I'm too busy trying to figure out my own thoughts to try to worry about other people's as well. So stop trying to control them. No matter how they respond, I won't make it mean I'm a terrible person. And this has to start with believing you're not a terrible person. Find the part of you there and reinforce that as much as you possibly can. And the last one, no matter how they respond, I will be able to handle it. So as you go through your days and weeks and months and years, find ways to be vulnerable with the people that are worth it and make sure that it's worth the price.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. Many of you will be able to take the ideas that you've heard and apply them in your daily life, and that's really all you need. That's amazing. But for those of you who could use a little one-on-one help with how to make these things actually work for you in your real life, please reach out. The link to schedule a consult with me is in the show notes. You don't have to do this alone. See you soon.